Sometimes it is just too dang hot to print PLA. Resin is, yep, still toxic. And what happens when you expose the traces on a Prusa heat bed? All this and more, PrintFix Friday, episode 149. Let's get into it. Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel, and hey, welcome to Fixing Printer Failures. If you're new here and you're struggling with 3D printer fails, we are here to help out. You can reach out to us on all the social medias on screen and in that description. And hey, while you're down there, leave a like and get subscribed. We're gonna start off with one that's been popping up more and more lately. With how hot it is, especially in the EU and kind of the Midwest of the United States, we're seeing people's printers, especially ones that don't have air conditioning or the machines are not in an air-conditioned space, being unable to print with PLA. We have a submission here from Discord member Mullet, who says, my climate just got worse. Up to 100% relative humidity at night, and 95% as I write. As someone that lives in Florida, I totally understand it is basically that outside all the time. Temperatures from 30 to 35 C, that's 86 to 95, air temperature, and 40 to 50 C on the ground, and sunlit surfaces like roofs and walls. Yes, same thing here. Mullet is not in the United States, but dealing with similar issues. I tried printing PLA and it was stringy like moisty hell, so I tried again. From a Sunlu S4 dryer. No stringing whatsoever, but I think I may have heat creep. Or is this the effect of getting the cheapest filament available? Could be a bit of both. It just stops printing. Extruder is not skipping, no filament grinding noises, nothing, but the print head moves in air, doing nothing. Print at 205, 210, 215 with same effect, Diamondback 0.4, and with a regular 0.4 brass. It's in Mark 3S generic PLA, except the temps are shown. It is enclosed, but the doors are open, fans are working all correctly. No problems with the hot end cooling fan whatsoever, as any abnormal readings from the tacho would stop the print. We can see that he's also included a relative humidity graph, which is sad. I'm very sorry. But when we're looking at this, if this is actually PLA, you can see the extra diameter there. And what looks like it could be grinding a little bit, this is heat creep. At least I'm fairly certain it's heat creep due to environmental issues. When your ambient air temperature is close to what PLA starts to soften at, right? If your chamber gets above 40 C and you're printing PLA, you're gonna have a bad time. Well, if you're drying PLA in a dryer, it's going through an insulated Bowden tube into a printer that, while the doors are open, is still technically in an insulated environment. There's gonna be some issues that occur with this. And really, the best bit of advice that we have is to print with PETG, because there's not a great way to solve this problem. If you're unable to air condition your space, or you're simply not able to get it cold enough for it to even matter, then yeah, you gotta start playing with higher temp materials. Mullet is not the first nor the last to post about this. They're just the one that gave a lot of data, including that relative humidity scale, and a pretty decent photo showing what that cold pull looks like. It's a very clean cold pull, but it's still kind of angry. Now, if Mullet was in the United States, I would say that they should print with today's sponsor, Printed Solid, who makes awesome filament right here in America, although shipping overseas is very expensive, so pretty much available here in the continental United States. And hey, if you check that description, there might be a giveaway form down there, you know, if you want to get yourself some filament, potentially win a roll from Printed Solid shipped directly to you in the United States. But if you are like Mullet and live in the EU, we'll get you a t-shirt totally free. Not these. We're not selling embroidered shirts, but the cat shirt that she's been seeing me wear. We are finally through our first stage of testing. Now I'm going through second stage of testing for the merch store launching at the end of the month. So that's your kind of thing. Get subscribed. Maybe I'll do a whole podcast on it. Like, I have like $2,500 worth of testing into finding the right t-shirt company. And by the way, to qualify for that giveaway, you'll have to leave a comment talking about one of these print failures and what you would do to potentially solve them. If you think I got it wrong or you think I got it right, let me know. You also must be a channel subscriber. Doesn't cost you anything, but it could win you some free stuff. Huge thank you to Printed Solid for sponsoring these filament giveaways and making this kind of thing possible. Check out Printed Solid, links in the description as well. But really the option here is just to change your material. I don't like saying that because it seems like very much of a cop-out answer, but it's not, right? If you can't change the environment, you are forced to change the material. There's no in between here. You have to do it this way. And unfortunately, for those that are dealing with unprecedented heat, you're kind of stuck dealing with an off-the-shelf solution, which is a material with a higher softening temperature like PETG, which should be good to ambient temps around 55 or 60 C. Maybe even 65 to 70, but it can start to get soft around 70, especially when you're dealing with a Bowden tube or a heat break inside of a printer. Because remember, a heat break, while its job is to separate heat from the heat sink and the hot end, some heat does still get into that heat sink. And if you're blowing hot air across something that's already hot, it's going to be a percentage or a set number of degrees above that ambient temperature. And it's a couple more than you think. Like back when we were running really heavy dehumidification in here, when I used to keep this office sub 10% ambient humidity, back when I hated myself, apparently, we could not print in PLA at all. It would not work ever. And I just fell in love with PETG since then. And so I understand that pain. Now that we've kind of let things go a little bit in here, my filament does need to be dried more often, although it's often not fully wet filament, but when it does get a little bit damp, the filament can start to get brittle, it can crack, especially the 285mm for our TAS 6, which, I don't know, if you're in the Tampa Bay area and you want a TAS 6, hit me up. I will make you a great deal to get that thing out of the shop. I want the space back. But yeah, certainly like 285 filament is really, really problematic for breaking when it gets a little bit damp. But what can be done here, right? If you need to dry your filament to print it, you could dry it, then let it cool down, then try to print it. But in that cool down cycle, with that much ambient humidity, it's going to start absorbing water, and there's not much you can do to stop it. You can try to play this game of back and forth, or you can just get PETG, which you can print right out of a dryer. It's not gonna care. It's just gonna work totally fine. So that was my recommendation. And he asked if Sunloop PETG is any good. I've never had issues with it, so yeah, should be fine. Moving on to people that apparently don't watch this channel and apparently never listen to me when I say that resin is toxic. I'm gonna be clear with you. I'm about to show you guys some images that you could construe are quite graphic. If you do want to skip this for whatever reason, this is the timestamp that you will need to go to. This does depict someone who has had their skin damaged by 3D printer resin. You've been warned. We're taking a look at it. This is an individual who said, so I've had a resin printer for a while now. Long story short, I made a print and realized I had run out of gloves when I went to take off the build plate. Figured, screw it. I'll handle it barehanded just this once. Yeah, turns out, don't do that. Resin cured under skin in sunlight gave me second-degree chemical burns once it cured on my phalanges. So what we have here are, yes, actual freaking chemical burns. And they're pretty lucky, right? This just got to, it looks like maybe the first 1 or 2 layers of skin here. And we can see it, the individual says, I washed my hands thoroughly as soon as I was done. Not entirely certain I believe that, or whatever soap you're using, it's not all that good. Don't know if maybe the soap and water wasn't enough to do it, or already soaked in, or what. It is what it is. Live and learn. Taught a valuable lesson. 1, if you get resin on your hands, don't go wash it in your sink. Because resin is toxic. It is toxic to the waterways. It is toxic to the sewer system. It is toxic to fish, to animals, and to humans. We don't want to touch resin. And we can see that, you know, someone said, hey, the fact that you left this on your hand long enough to cure is nuts. Someone said, well, some people are much more allergic to this stuff than others. You might be predisposed to being quite allergic to this photopolymer resin. And over time, you will get more allergic to it. It's a contact allergen. So the more that you touch it, the worse it gets. Always, always, always wear PPE. Leave your friggin' resin prints in the freaking printer. I don't care. Get gloves. Get long gloves, like at least half to elbow gloves. Wear a long sleeve lab coat, clothing that you don't care about. In the event that you get resin on your clothes, you just don't have to care about it. But always wear multiple layers of clothing, so in the event that you do get a bit of a spill, it can soak into the first layer and hopefully not get to the second. Wear a lab coat. They also look cool. There's not a downside here. We can see WIP Models says that I work professionally with resin for more than 25 years. And I know people who started off fine and now can't even be in the room with it or their throats start to swell. You'll be fine if you wear PPE and have proper engineering controls. That's right. Wear your PPE. We often say, wear a respirator, or at least have some sort of ventilation in the room too. You vent the fumes out of your resin printers because they stink. They stink for a reason. If something smells, you don't want to touch it. But yeah, UV resin you have to be very, very careful with. My general protocol, if I ever get it on my skin, is to use clean paper towels and alcohol. I will cover the area around it with paper towels, and then I will just have alcohol pouring over it. I will wipe the paper towel up and over the area that was exposed. It seems to work well. That was back when I was a little bit more cavalier about my PPE, but I don't take chances now. It's not worth the exposure, right? My friend Courtney of Filament Stories, she is allergic to resin printers and she loves 3D printing. Thankfully, her channel's not called Resin Stories because that might have been a bit challenging for her, but it's called Filament Stories, so, you know, that's pretty awesome. She's been a former podcast guest as well. We'll card to her episode so you can take a look. We'll have to have Courtney back on. She's one of those people that her throat starts to get scratchy, her eyes get a little watery, and that's because she is very allergic to the resin, and she has never had a lot of exposure to it. She's naturally more sensitive, and others will be. You might not be very sensitive to it at all, but the more you get exposed to it, the more likely it is that you develop a pretty serious allergen. This individual here is very lucky. This should theoretically heal in at least a couple of weeks. Hope you don't need fingerprinting done in the next couple of weeks, because that's not gonna go for you. Now, I would love if resin manufacturers would make resin that doesn't react with human skin like this, but it appears that it's the actual UV curing agent of the resin, right? The resin itself should be reasonably okay, but it's that UV curing agent that seems to be the particular problem. I'm sure that there are people that know a lot about resin, and I'm looking at you, Mayor Makes, because I know you watch my channel. If you or any of the experts out there that understand the resin and the chemistry of it better than I do can comment with what makes it so dangerous and what we could potentially do to solve that problem, that would be awesome. And if any of you out there are hardcore chemists and want to talk about this in a more meaningful way, I would love to have you on the podcast. And if that's the case, you can email me, youtube@3dmusketeers.com, and we will look at setting a podcast date here in the near future. Next up, a bit of a difficulty from the Prusa Facebook group. It was submitted in our Patreon Discord because I firmly believe that I should never go on Facebook because it is a terrible place. But we've got a Prusa bed slinger, and this is from sliding the build plate on and off the printer. When you use magnetic build sheets, you want to get them keyed up. Prusa has two keys of how to get the build plate in the same spot. They're right here. There's a pin here, and then there's a pin on the opposite side. Those pins align with markers on the build plate that kind of align it. A thing that a lot of people do is they'll put the build plate down and then they'll just slide it backwards till it hits those pins. And this is one of a buddy's, actually. He replaced it, but he gave me this print bed, so we actually have a spare heater for a Prusa. This is from dragging off the build plate, but it's the same actual effect, right? You expose the copper tracing. Now, I've seen them way worse than this, where the actual build plate will short out the heater bed, basically causing it to fail. It can often kill the motherboard if it doesn't pop the fuse fast enough. When you see this even start to happen, one of the best things we found, and I believe Prusa at one point recommended it, not sure if they still do, is nail polish. I like the clear nail polish because it's the easiest for me to use and not pick the wrong stuff that's too expensive out of the Better 3/4 nail polish collection. But as you can see how it's a little bit shiny, there is nail polish on there. You could use Kapton tape, you could use black nail polish if you wanted to, but I like the clear because it's a little bit easier for me to see. The big thing is you don't want to build up too much of a layer. The more layer that you build up, the more issues that you can cause with your actual flatness of your build plate. Now, we can see that there's a probe point pretty much right there, so we should be okay. And up at that back corner, you don't really print much anyways. So while there is some printable area that could be affected, it's unlikely that it's going to be a big issue if you solve it now. Kapton is good because you just get a wide piece of Kapton tape, stick it on there, and be done. But I might look at doing both. Kapton is great because it isolates electrically and it allows heat to pass through quite well. But if you scrape through the Kapton tape, you're back to where you started. So I would do a really thin coating of nail polish. Some sort of high heat would be fine, although I think I just used literally regular clear nail polish. Obviously, heat up the build plate in a safe area, like just take the printer outside or something. Heat up the build plate once everything is dry to make sure that whatever nail polish or coating that you put on the bed is not going to somehow either flash off, burn off, bubble, whatever, because that could obviously damage your print surface. But I would say the best thing you should do, whether or not you're gonna do it, is to actually just go ahead and replace the entire print bed. We can see that a commenter also suggests a high heat spray paint, which is actually a decent idea. I happen to like the clear nail polish, and another commenter says that Prusa recommends it too. So, oh, and someone said Kapton tape. I could have just look at that. That's like reasonably decent Facebook comments. So good job, Prusa Facebook group, for not being all that toxic. I assume there's some damage on the other side too, with how much damage we see across the build plate. That spray paint might not actually be a bad idea. You're just gonna have to wait a while for it to cure off. It is not gonna be as accurate, right? Because you can definitely feel where that nail polish is, but hey, it'll get the job done in a pinch if you need it. Next up, an Elegoo that destroyed itself. I just came out to a print that have torn the bed from the printer. It's not 2 prints since I adjusted the bed using the paper method and adjusted the bed with knobs to make the offset. Am I expected to just adjust the knobs and offset every time I print? Is this a known issue with this printer? Unfortunately, we don't actually have an answer for what printer it is. Bit of a bummer, but I think it's a Neptune 2. We can see though that, yeah, the machine just kind of destroyed itself. We can see one of the wheels popped off, another wheel popped off. Actually, it looks like, did all the wheels pop off? They might have. Springs have come out, bolts have come out. The entire thing has just kind of rattled itself in pieces, and I'm guessing this is from the nozzle digging in to the build plate itself. This is hopefully not that expensive of a lesson to learn, but I presume it could be a relatively expensive lesson to learn. The build plate's gonna run you probably 20 to 30 bucks if it's a regular, you know, Neptune and not one of the larger ones. The springs and screws are probably fine. I'm hoping that the actual heat bed is fine. You will need a new nozzle because you've definitely damaged your nozzle as well. One of the big things that we always say, especially when you're new to 3D printing, is watch that first layer. If that first layer doesn't look good, you can't walk away. You gotta make sure it looks good. If they adjust the bed using the paper method and then adjusted the bed with the knobs to make the offset, now it's no longer level. So when you're doing the paper method with the knobs, that's both done at the same time. If you want to get your Z offset right, that is done on the screen when you are printing, right? You can do it live with the knobs, but it's a little bit more difficult, especially if you're new to this. You don't want to have to do it while the machine is moving. Only do that when you're a little bit more comfortable and kind of understand the risks associated with doing something like that. When we look at what this would be like long-term, and the individual said resin printing is so much easier. And yeah, it actually kind of is. Resin is harder on the software side because getting all the support material right and everything like that. And it can certainly be more difficult if you get like a print that, you know, somehow cures the FEP, or there's a bunch of random crap inside of your resin that you have to filter out. That can be tedious. If this is your first experience or close to it of filament-based 3D printing, I can totally understand why you would say that resin printing is easier, because technically I would agree with you, but once you get the hang of filament printing, I think it is considerably easier and, well, as you saw earlier, much safer as well. As far as what to do here, we had to assess our damages, get replacement parts in if they're not already existing, and let's go through our Z offset and our bed leveling tutorial, which we will card to. But certainly our Z offset is way, way, way too close, right? We normally say if ruffles have ridges, you're too close. There ain't no damn ruffles. You're making your ruffled print bed smooth, and that means you are way too freaking close. Thankfully though, we're looking at maybe 50 bucks worth of a mistake here, which is not an insignificant amount of money, but is certainly better than buying a completely brand new 3D printer. But certainly, until you get incredibly comfortable with your machines, do not leave them unattended. Even when you are comfortable, Everyone loves watching a first layer go down. At least watch a bit of that to make sure that your print is going to stick. While you're still learning, let's stick with smaller parts for right now so you can learn the basics of it, get comfortable with it, and then you can go larger. Just how you probably wouldn't recommend someone buy like an Elegoo Jupiter for their first 3D printer and do a huge build on it with a resin print, I would recommend starting off smaller, working your way up to doing the full build plate. I understand, I got the full build plate, I'm gonna freaking use it. I totally get that mentality, but let's slow down a little bit, let's take it easy, and if you need any more specific advice, we are happy to help. But yeah, I'd love to know from you down in the comments, are you dealing with PLA having the same issues? Are you dealing with elevated temperatures around your home or in your surrounding community as well? I'm sorry you all are dealing with Florida weather. It's not what I would want. I don't like this weather. It's atrocious. Why do you almost never see me film outside? I'm not shiny. I'm shiny because I'm sweating. It's hot in here. But I'm keeping my clothes on. It's not that kind of channel. But what is apparently that kind of channel are all the names listed right next to me at the $5 tier and higher, because that's going to be the segue that I do to say thank you to all of our Patreon, YouTube channel member, and PayPal members at the $5 tier and higher for being the super awesome people that they are. Thank you all. Seriously, we wouldn't be here without you. And if you do want to support the channel financially, you can do so by clicking those links in that description, wherever it might be. I guess they're moving it around now too. You're messing with us. We always just say description down below, and I gotta keep catching myself when I say that. YouTube. Right below people, the entire PrintFixFriday series, so if you're looking for something to watch next, go check that out. And next to that, I don't know, some random video out of our catalog. I think you should click them both and enjoy them. But that is really all I have for you guys today, so stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones, and hey, don't forget to leave a like and get subscribed. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one.